When you think of ancient Egypt, what comes to mind? Pyramids, Tutankhamun's golden mask, an ancient civilization that feels otherworldly. But behind the grandeur and the glory, there was a darker side. A history written not in stone, but in blood, pain, and the screams of those who had no voice. For thousands of years, Egyptian physicians pushed the boundaries of medicine, not always with compassion, but with brutal, terrifying trial and error. And many of their so-called discoveries came at a horrifying price. This is a tale history books often skip, the chilling truth behind the medical experiments of ancient Egypt. Egyptian doctors were pioneers. They were among the first in recorded history to treat complex wounds, perform surgeries, and even study the intricate workings of the human brain. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, one of the oldest surviving medical texts, details surgical procedures with a level of sophistication that is truly mind-boggling for its time. But there was a critical, fatal flaw in their understanding. They had no concept of germs, no knowledge of infection in the way we understand it today. To them, disease wasn't caused by microscopic organisms, but by evil spirits, divine punishment, or the curses of their enemies. And when your entire medical philosophy is based on superstition, your methods for finding cures become twisted. So, who did they test their new ideas on? Not willing volunteers. They tested on the powerless, people captured from other countries, prisoners. They're really poor with no choices, and sometimes even kids. These individuals weren't seen as patients in need of healing. They were basically living experiments, like totally pushing the limits of what's possible. The subjects of a grim and often fatal scientific curiosity. Imagine this scene. You are lying on a stone slab, fully conscious. A surgeon, who is also a priest, approaches with a set of bronze tools. There is no anesthesia, no sterile environment. At best, you might have been given a strong dose of alcohol or some herbal sedative to dull the senses. At worst, you get nothing at all. You are held down by several assistants as the surgeon begins to cut. Papyrus records describe surgeries performed on patients who were wide awake, screaming, and restrained, while doctors stitched open flesh, set broken bones, and even amputated limbs. If the patient survived the shock, the pain, and the inevitable infection, the procedure was hailed as a success. If they died, well, the knowledge gained from their death was still considered a victory. Pain was not an obstacle to be overcome. It was simply part of the process. One of the most disturbing and well-known practices was trepanation. This is the act of drilling, scraping, or cutting a hole directly into the human skull. For the Egyptians, this process had a deep spiritual meaning. They believed it created an exit for the evil spirits, or malevolent vapors, that caused seizures, migraines, and mental illness. But make no mistake, it was also a cold, calculated experiment. Archaeologists have found numerous skulls with these holes. By performing trepanation, doctors could directly observe the living brain. They could see how it reacted to being prodded, how the removal of bone affected the person, and most importantly, how long a person could survive such a traumatic injury. Some of these ancient skulls show signs of healing around the edges of the hole, a clear indication that the victim, incredibly, lived for weeks, months, or even years after the procedure. But many others show no healing at all. For those people, the experiment was their last experience. There were sacrifices on the altar of medical curiosity. The line between science and superstition in Egyptian medicine was dangerously blurred. Their pharmacology was a bizarre and often lethal cocktail of remedies. Doctors would prescribe and apply substances that sound stomach-churning to us today. They used animal blood, crushed organs, and even feces, believing these things held some magical healing power. Crocodile dung was a common ingredient in contraceptive mixtures, while rotting meat was sometimes packed into open wounds. These substances weren't tested in a lab. They were tested directly on human beings. If a wound became horribly infected after being packed with moldy bread or animal waste, it wasn't the treatment that was blamed. The failure was attributed to the patient's own spiritual impurity, or the overwhelming power of the demon possessing them. In reality, countless victims likely died from sepsis, tetanus, and severe poisoning, their deaths serving only as a grim footnote in a priest's records, teaching them what not to do next time. And what about the dead? We often think of mummification as a purely religious ritual, a way to prepare the body for the afterlife. but it served a dual purpose. It was also the world's first large-scale project in anatomical research. For centuries, the embalmers, who were often closely associated with physicians, meticulously dissected and preserved bodies. Day after day, they removed organs, studied their placement, and observed how different tissues reacted to natron, salt, and other chemicals. They learned the layout of the human body, the pathways of major blood vessels, and the nature of decay. This wasn't just for religious purposes. This invaluable anatomical knowledge flowed directly back into the world of the living, informing surgical practices and medical theory. In a very real and gruesome sense, the dead were teaching the doctors how to better experiment on the living. The embalming tent was a classroom of human anatomy. The experimental nature of their medicine extended to all areas of life, including gynecology and childbirth. Ancient Egyptian texts describe surprisingly accurate early pregnancy tests. A woman would be instructed to urinate on separate bags of barley and wheat seeds. If the barley grew, it was predicted she would have a boy. If the wheat grew, it meant a girl. If not, no baby. Turns out, the estrogen in a pregnant woman's urine can boost seed growth. Women used risky herbal remedies for fertility and miscarriages. The effects were documented with cold detachment. If the woman survived and the desired outcome was achieved, the formula was recorded as a success. If she suffered, bled uncontrollably, or died, the failure was simply blamed on the will of the gods. Female bodies were often viewed as vessels, tools for reproduction and experimentation, not as individuals with inherent worth. It's crucial to understand the context of this world. There were no medical ethics boards. There was no concept of informed consent. There were no laws protecting patients from malpractice or experimentation. The doctors were often priests, figures of immense authority who answered only to the pharaoh and the gods. In a society that believed the pharaoh was a living god, and that knowledge was a sacred pursuit, human suffering was often seen as an acceptable, even necessary, price for progress. Every scar, every agonizing procedure, every life cut short on an operating table was considered a small sacrifice for the greater good of accumulating wisdom. The legacy of ancient Egypt is complex. They gave the world astounding advancements. They developed surgical tools, identified diseases, and wrote medical texts that were studied for centuries. But we must never forget how that knowledge was obtained. Those discoveries were built on a foundation of experimentation without mercy, on the bodies of the forgotten and the voiceless. Behind every chapter in an ancient medical text, there are untold stories of victims whose pain and suffering fueled that progress. So the next time you marvel at the genius of ancient Egyptian medicine, remember the true cost, because progress without compassion, discovery without empathy, can be just as terrifying as ignorance itself. Thank you for watching. If you found this glimpse into the darker side of history interesting, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the stories you thought you knew.